All right, hello everyone. Muckluck here. Today is Friday, June 9th, 2023, and we have got a preview to the upcoming patch that comes out in a couple weeks. I really want to stress that this is not live now. This goes live, hopefully not, on June 27th. You'll understand my trepidations soon. As always, the goal of reviewing these changes is to gather your feedback before the live release. We'll be following the conversation and making further adjustments as needed. I also have the, dear God, oh my God, the freaking beacons are lit. I had this on dark mode earlier, it got turned off, I am so sorry. So anyway, what we are going to do, I'm going to try to condense this as much as possible. They had a stream on Twitch that was 2 hours long, where they went over these changes, and I watched the whole thing, and then they put the notes on the forums, and then the wiki crew put it on the wiki. So I'm going to try to TLDR this as much as I possibly can, so that it doesn't take you 2 hours. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to the preview for the June 27th balance update. As always, the goal of previewing these changes is to gather your feedback before the live release. We'll be following the conversation and making further adjustments as needed. Thanks, Cal, Skills and Balance Lead. I will have links to all the pages I just showed for a few seconds each down below. As we mentioned in the last Studio Update blog, the primary goals for this update are to improve the feeling of moment-to-moment gameplay from any boon support builds. We want these builds to have more flexibility in their utility skill choice and not be required to activate a particular utility type on cooldown to provide quickness or alacrity. A quick example of that is Druids slamming the buttons for Spirits every time they cool down. I think Spectres do similar with Wells. I don't play Spectre, but I think that's how it is. Also, you've got Scrappers that have to hit their gyro buttons and their heal key every time they come off cooldown to keep quickness on people, which, then they never have those skills when they need them, and it's rough. So they're trying to tackle that. Introducing alternate playstyles for some specialization. They recently teased Quickness Deadeye, and they teased DPS Druid. Tuning up some underutilized weapons and solidifying their roles within their professions. So a few weapons that weren't getting a lot of play. Removing additional skill type specific recharge reduction traits and rolling the reduction into baseline skills where it makes sense to do so. The goal of these changes is to give players more flexibility in trait selection. I don't know how that worked out. So essentially what that means is, for a quick example, Trapper's Expertise here reduces the cooldown on Ranger traps by 20%. They took that recharge reduction of 20% out and then just gave it to the traps they thought were deserving of it. So some traps now get it for free and others now have no possible way of ever obtaining it. So I'm not real thrilled about that, as you can probably tell, but let's continue. General changes. To make the more reliable in endgame PvE content, all effects that benefit when the player strikes from the flank or behind will now always apply their benefits when striking defiant foes. So you can backstab bosses in the face. You can face stab them, front face stab them. Confusion damage has also been adjusted. Damage over time, increasing the base damage over time quite a bit, and increases the condition damage scaling quite a bit. However, the damage on activation has been reduced. So right now, if you use Confusion on a boss that attacks slowly, maybe the damage is here, but if they hit fast, it's up here. What they're trying to do is make it do like this. They want the margin to be a bit smaller. That makes sense. I don't hate that change. Basically, right now, Confusion is crap on some bosses, but insane on the others, and they want it to be kind of good on everything. So that's what they're doing there. All right, Elementalist. Catalyst's quickness isn't provided by utility skills, but we felt like it could still benefit from a usability improvement. We've updated Spectacular Sphere to grant quickness from any Jade Sphere instead of just air. Catalyst, rejoice, you're no longer just locked to Air Sphere. I fear you even more in PvP now. Which should give Catalyst players a bit more flexibility with their skill rotation. We've also made some improvements to Tempest damage builds with an update to Tempestuous Araya, as well as some general improvements for Offhand Dagger and the Weaver in PvP. Fire Grab got a larger attack angle, making it easier to land. Frost Aura reduced cooldown. There is a lot of things. Because they baked the 20% cooldown reduction into many skills and then got rid of the 20% cooldown reduction trait, there is a lot of lines of text in these patch notes that just says cooldown reduced. Okay, that's why it is. I'm going to gloss over those. Frost Aura reduced, Cleansing Wave reduced, Updraft, larger radius. They said that it was a bit too easy to just walk out of it. If you were fighting an Ellie and the Ellie uses Updraft, you could just step to the side. They want it to at least force you to think about using a dodge roll. Churning Earth, this skill no longer pulses cripple and bleeding while charging, and it now performs a short leap and strikes the ground. So Churning Earth was the one that you'd go like charging, boom! And often, Ellie's would use this in conjunction with the teleport skill. I've seen many videos of Cello Frag where he's blowing people up with that skill, where he will charge it and teleport onto a group and just annihilate all of them with it. Now, it's not as powerful as that, but it no longer requires charging. Now you just leap forward and it instantly does the smaller version of the eruption the moment you finish the leap and impact with the ground. Reduce the total casting time down to 0.8 seconds, reduce the attack radius a bit, reduce the power coefficient a bit, and reduce the bleed stacks a bit, but again, it's very fast now. Written in Stone. This trait no longer reduces the recharge of Signet skills, but it now grants an aura to the Ellie after they use a Signet skill. So any trait that gave a 20% reduction, if it didn't do enough other things, they gave it something else to replace that. Signet of Restoration, reduced. Signet of Fire, cooldown reduced. Signet of Earth, the passive effect no longer grants toughness. This is because anything on Ellie that just gave toughness at different times would wreak havoc in raids. Many raid bosses will choose who they're going to hit based on who has the highest toughness, and that's how on many fights you determine who is the tank. So by having some Ellie in the raid using Signet of Earth, all of a sudden they activate it, and hey, you're promoted to tank, have fun, and lots of screaming ensues. This makes total sense. I got no problem with this. They're making it just give you flat damage reduction instead of the toughness stat. Same outcome, but with less bosses running all over the place. Reduce cooldown in various game modes. Every time I say this, I just realized on the screen it's a bit cropped. Let us fix that right now. Earlier I had this appropriately sized for the player on the Twitch page, not the forums, and that has been corrected. Sorry about that. Glyph of Elemental Harmony, reduce cooldown. Elemental Surge, this trait no longer reduces the cooldown of arcane skills. Arcane Brilliance, increase the base healing and reduce the bonus healing per strike from 20% to 10. Reduce the cooldown as well. Arcane Power, reduce the cooldown. Inscription, this trait no longer reduces the cooldown of glyph skills and now always grants resistance in addition to previous effects. Arcane Prowess now grants Fury instead of Might in PvP and World v. World. This is a theme that you're going to see in a lot of things. There's a lot of upcoming traits that you'll see. It will do this in PvE. Often it's Quickness or Alacrity, but in World v. World or PvP, it will do something different than Quickness or Alacrity. Tempestuous Araya no longer causes shouts to inflict weakness, now also grants the Tempest a bonus to outgoing damage for a period of time after they give an ally an aura. Weaver, Shearing Edge has a faster projectile speed. Twin Strike fixed an issue that prevented the skill from applying the intended amount of burning in PvP. Cauterizing Strike increased the burning stacks in PvP. Gale Strike increased the float duration by 0.75 seconds, which is substantial in PvP. Twist of Fate reduced, okay, this one was big, reduced the ammo cost from 2 to 1, but it now has a much shorter cooldown. Twist of Fate is a very popular stun break option, and it is going from 75-second cooldown to 30-second cooldown. But you can't hold 2 of them now, you can only hold 1 of them now. That's the trade-off. They're giving it the same treatment that, I believe it was Stand Your Ground got. You can correct me if I'm wrong down below. I think it was Stand Your Ground got that treatment a while back. Catalyst. Spectacular Sphere now grants quickness when deploying your Jade Sphere in any attunement, not just air, in addition to the boons it currently granted. Quickness duration reduced from 5 to 2 seconds. Energized Elements. This trait now grants Might instead of Fury in PvP and World v. World, which I was talking about that kind of thing a little while ago. Is Shake It Off. It was, okay, Shake It Off, not Stand Your Ground. Thank you. Engineer. Mechanist penalty for being too far from its mech is something that we've been keeping an eye on since it was added to the game. We think there's room for improvement, and in this update, we're changing the penalty from a mech stat reduction to an increased cooldown for mech command skills, so like the F1, F2, and F3. We believe that this change will make the penalty more visible and easier to understand. So I want to pause there, and I want to tell you guys about an issue with that I have. So Ranger currently has a skill that is called Signet of Renewal. And when you activate Signet of Renewal, you will stun break yourself and take all conditions on you and move them to your pet, which usually involves the pet exploding a second later. So I've called this Signet of PETA many times. However, the condition removal part only works if the pet is within 600 range of you. Here's the thing, there's no clear indicator. For those who don't know, if you click an enemy or a target, if you look down here, see this little red bar down here? That bar tells you they're not in range. Okay, if I click this guy, he's in range of my axe skills. If I click, that guy way over there, he's not in range of my axe skills. That's what that tiny little red bar there means. They're not in range. Signet of Renewal doesn't have an indicator like that. It does not tell you when you are in range of your pet. So you might think you're within 600 range, hit the button, it doesn't cure the conditions, then you die, and then you respawn, and it's still on cooldown. And it's an awful, awful feeling. That's what it looks like they're giving to Mechanus. You won't know. You might think you're like just barely in range of your mech. You tell it to use its F1, F2, F3. They go on cooldown, and they go on a massive cooldown because you weren't within 600 range or whatever it is. It's gonna suck. And also, any of the DPS mechs that just leave those skills on autocast, if they step out of range for a second and the mech automatically uses them, you're gonna get heavily punished. I actually think the thing that they're replacing, where the stats would get diminished a little and then it would repair itself when you went back into range, I think that this is actually worse than what it's replacing. But that's just my thoughts. Okay, we believe that this change will make the penalty more visible and easier to understand. The only way it's going to be more visible is if like the mech glows yellow when you're out of range or something. Scrapper is also getting an adjustment to how it applies quickness, with kinetic accelerators now triggering when successfully finishing a combo with a leap or blast finisher. Scrapper. Currently, Scrapper has to spam their gyros to apply quickness. There's a trait where anytime you use a gyro, which is technically labeled a well, the well will give an ally super speed. And there's another trait where anytime you apply super speed, they get quickness. So that's why they're constantly pumping out super speed and quickness. However, they have to just hit all their buttons every time they light up, and it's not great gameplay. You can't save the blast gyro for when you need to interrupt enemies. You can't save your heal skill for when you need a heal. You have to just burn them constantly. So they're changing it to you no longer have to spam the gyros. Now you have to spam combos, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I think over time, the community will find out the best rotations to do the most combos while still doing the most DPS. For example, the hammer on Scrapper, if they do hammer 5, that makes a lightning field, and they do hammer 3 through it. Hammer 3 is actually 3 leap finishers. They do like hop, hop, hop. That'll be glorious with this if every one of those hops gives everybody else quickness. Thank you guys. So that, it says leap or blast, so, that's an example of a leap. And then, blast gyro. Blast gyro is actually a fire field, and then it's a blast finisher at the end of the field, so that would just be, self-sufficient. So the con to this is there's a lot more engineers and pugs that know how to slam keys than there are engineers that know how to do combos. Anyway, that goes for the whole player base. Most of the player base, I think, is still learning combos. So I think this is going to make it less friendly when you're grouping with pugs, unless they've actually done a bit of homework. But continuing on, Med Blaster has reduced range. I have no idea why. That's the one skill on Medkit. The number of boons that affects this skill has been limited to 4 in PvP game modes, competitive game modes. It improves the visual effect of the skill to better match its radius. That's just the water gun that they do when they're spamming Medkit 1. Fumigate, that's the elixir gun, condition cleanse, and a cone in front of you, reduce the cooldown World v World. Super elixir is getting buffed in World v World. Well, the base of it is getting buffed healing, but the coefficient is getting reduced. The healing is getting reduced in World v World. The skill's now unblockable. This greatly confused me for a little bit until I looked into it. Apparently, Super Elixir, although it has 0 offensive components, it is a projectile. So if you were trying to fire it, but the enemy had a projectile block on top of you, you literally could not use this skill. So they actually made it all elixirs where you like throw them and it would give an ally boons or something. They're now unblockable simply so that you can still use them while inside an enemy, like, bubble or something like that without that being a problem. I'm sorry, I misread this. Yeah, this is why I do this live, so they can tell me when I'm wrong. The healing coefficient was increased. The base healing was increased and the coefficient was increased, but they reduced the number of pulses to compensate for that, and it's unblockable to get through barriers. Power Wrench no longer reduces the cooldown of toolkit skills. Also, Power Wrench has an effect where when you dodge, I believe it reduces the cooldown of your elite skills by 1 second. Now it's going back to 3, which it was a very long time ago, and they nerfed it, and now that's going back to what it was long ago. Reduce cooldown on many toolkit skills because of the Power Wrench thing. Pry Bar, Gear Shield, Magnet. Gadgeteer no longer reduces the cooldown of gadget skills. AED, personal battering ram, rocket boots, and slick shoes, throw mine, utility goggles, all of these are getting reduced cooldowns. Oh, utility goggles. When we were watching the 2-hour show, I actually pointed out that on their slide, they listed all gadgets except utility goggles. So I was like, oh, wow, that's weird, because, you know, on Ranger, they didn't reduce the cooldown of all the traps. I just thought they chose to leave utility goggles out. I guess they just forgot to put it on their slide on the show. Or I overlooked it. So all of those getting reduced cooldowns for free. HGH no longer reduces the cooldown of Elixir skills, so you don't have to go HGH if that's all you wanted it for. Elixir H reduced the cooldown from 25 to 20 seconds. Toss Elixir H is unblockable. Reduce cooldown, unblockable, reduce cooldown. Okay, so all of these are unblockable, friendly elixirs, and they all get reduced cooldowns baked into it. Boom, I just summarized that whole section. You can pause it if you want to read that. Scrapper, Speed of Synergy, reduces ally super speed from 3 seconds to 2 seconds in World v World. Slight decrease to how much super speed the Scrappers can put out in World v World. Reduced personal super speed from 7 to 4 seconds. Kinetic Accelerators has been reworked. Apply boons to nearby allies, mostly quickness, when you combo with a blast or leap finisher, and your function gyro is also now a blast finisher. Now, function gyro was already a lightning field, so assuming it stays that way, it's going to be a lightning field and a blast finisher, which I think mean it might combo itself and provide instant quickness the second you use it, if it's going to follow the same rules as blast finisher. There are not many skills in the game that are a field and a finisher both. But the blast gyro is an example of a skill that is. So the, excuse me, I've got the sniffles, I'm sorry about that. So yeah, Hollow Smith Prime Light Beam fixed an issue that caused the burning from this skill to be applied multiple times per pulse to larger enemies. So a little hitbox abuse there. Mechanist Mechanical Genius, this trait has been reworked. This is the one I'm worried about because of my experience with a similar trait on Ranger. Instead of incurring a stat reduction penalty, command skills now take longer to recharge if it activated while the mech is further than a range of 360. So if you are not just grinding against your mech like you're on a subway, you are going to get punished when you go to use those command skills. I don't know how much. It doesn't say. I don't know if it's like plus 1 second or triple the cooldown. I have no idea, but I don't think this is going to go well. We will see. Mech Core Barrier Engine, that is the F3 of the support Mechanist, the Heal-a-Lack mech, the ham, where it spins around as a bunch of barrier. The base barrier and healing power coefficient from the automatic pulses are no longer split between modes, and we use the PvP and World values for PvE as well. Oh, I'm sorry, I was describing Barrier Burst. Engine's the passive. Barrier Burst, the base barrier granted by the skill, has been increased in PvE only, substantial. The healing power coefficient has been increased almost double. Guardian. Support Firebrand is a build that we've been improving in PvP over the last few balance updates, but it hasn't reached the level it needs to. In this update, we're improving the strength of Mantra of Lore's initial charges to make Firebrand's condition removal slightly more reliable. The shout cooldown reduction from Pure of Voice being rolled into the skill's baseline will allow Firebrands to better utilize Force of Will while still being able to equip shout skills. Guardian is also getting cooldown reduction added to many other utility skill types, including Signets, Meditations, Consecrations, and Traps. We're excited to see how this increased flexibility affects Guardian builds going forward. Chan Dracula, thank you for the tier 1. I really appreciate that. Core. Perfect Inscriptions no longer reduce cooldown of Signet skills. Reduce cooldown. Also, they reduced the healing because they thought this much healing was too much for a 25-second cooldown. Reduce cooldown, reduce cooldown, reduce cooldown. No longer reduces cooldown of spirit weapons. Reduce cooldown, no longer reduces the cooldown of meditation skills. Also increase the base healing of Monk's Focus. Reduce cooldown. Pure Voice no longer reduces the cooldown of shout skills. Reduce the cooldown baked into all of these. Reduce cooldown. Master of Consecrations no longer reduces the cooldown of consecration skills. Reduce cooldown. There you go. I just saved you like 15 minutes of watching the VOD. Dragon Hunter, this trait, Piercing Light no longer reduces the cooldown of trap skills. And there's all of those, and they've all been reduced. Hey, Twitch chat, you guys remember how I pointed out on the slide that there was only 5 skills listed, and there are 6 traps, 4 utilities, 1 heal, and 1 elite. So there's one missing here. So one of the Dragon Hunter traps did not get the 20% baked into it. Dragon Hunter main, one of you will have to point it out, as I've already forgotten which one it is. But yeah, there's only 5 there. There should be 6. Firebrand, Weighty Terms. This trait no longer reduces mantra charge recovery times. Increase pages granted from 1 to 2. Opening Passage. Increased number of conditions removed from 1 to 2 in PvP only. Increased ammunition recharge from 12 seconds to 18 seconds in PvP only. Clarified Conclusion. Reduce the number of conditions converted to boons from 5 to 3 in PvP only. Now, I think it's worth saying at this point, I don't main every single class in the game. I play a lot of Ranger, Engineer, and a healthy amount of Necro. The other 6 classes, kind of whimsical. So I'll have a lot more in-depth stuff to say about those classes, but I will try to cover everything as best as I can here. Mesmer. Mirage evasion has been a major pain point in competitive modes for a long time, and it was something we wanted to address in this update. Mirage will now have 100 endurance in PvP and World v World, that's 2 dodges, but will no longer be able to dodge while immobilized or under the effects of crowd control. We believe this is a good middle ground between the current version of Mirage Cloak and a potentially large rework, and we'll be keeping a close eye on how it plays out. We've also made some adjustments to Virtuoso Dagger to improve the reliability of its damage in competitive mode. So you can still spam your dodges to get stomps, or to do revives, or while attacking, but if you mess up and someone does get you in a stun, you can't dodge while in the stun, or in a root, or whatever. Obviously, I'm not a Mesmer main, but I feel that's fair. A good Mesmer is a very large percentage of the time dodging, blocking, reflecting, evading. You know, they're not attackable a lot of the time. And then when you finally land a CC on them, and then they just go, and, you know, then for the duration of the CC, they're invulnerable, and then they just, you know, whoop, 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 away. It feels pretty bad. So I think that's an okay change, but I'm sure the Mesmers will disagree with me. Signet of Humility, half the cooldown shaved off in PvE. Null Field, range reduction. Temporal Curtain, range reduction. Illusionary Membrane, reduce incoming damage reduction from 10 to 5 in PvP. Chaotic Persistence, reduce concentration and expertise by 100 in PvP. Illusionary Defense, reduced the damage reduction per stack from 2 to 1.5 in PvP. Auspicious Anguish, this trait now has an internal cooldown when you've become disabled. There's no internal cooldown when you gain Distortion. Bountiful Disillusionment, reduced vigor duration from 8 seconds to 5 in PvP. Escape Artist, this trait has been reworked. It now applies Distortion to phantasms when they are summoned. Oh boy, so your phantasms have a healthy amount of defense now. There's a much higher chance that they will do what they were summoned to do and not, you know, get caught in some AoE CC immediately after being summoned, which was sometimes the case. Chronomancer. Stretch Time. This trait has been reworked. Flow of Time will now affect nearby allies, granting alacrity to nearby allies when you summon a phantasm. Seize the Moment. Yeah, that's right. Chrono's alacrity has been changed again. Buckle up. Seize the Moment. This trait no longer causes Tides of Time to grant quickness and instead grants quickness to nearby allies when you summon a phantasm. Well of Senility, reduced cooldown from 25 seconds to 20 in PvE, increased pulse power coefficient by double in PvE, increased number of boons removed from 2 to 3 in PvE. Well of Action, reduced cooldown in PvE, increased power coefficient by double in PvE. The final pulse of the skill will now give alacrity instead of super speed. Mirage. Mirage can no longer dodge while immobile or under CC. Mirage Cloak, this trait no longer reduces Mirage's endurance in competitive modes. Chaos Vortex, reduced clone bleeding and torment duration from 8 seconds to 4. Imaginary Axes, reduced clone torment duration from 4 seconds to 2 in competitive. Split Surge, reduced might stacks from 2 to 1 in PvP. Elusive Mind, this trait now removes conditions when gaining Mirage Cloak instead of when dodging. Reduce the number of conditions removed from 2 to 1 in PvP and World v World. Virtuoso. Blade Song Distortion. Reduce distortion duration per blade from 1 second to 0.75 in PvE. Blade Turn Requiem. This skill no longer blocks incoming attacks. Blade Call. If the original target of the skill is in range, the returning blades will now lock onto that enemy. If not, the blades return to the player as normal. They did do a couple of examples, if you want to see it, of this. They showed it on a dummy in the video on their stream. Unstable Blade Storm. This skill is now a ground-targeted spell instead of a projectile. The skill strikes enemies in range in addition to firing projectiles at nearby enemies. Twin Blade Restoration will now always cleanse conditions when healing. The first blade will now always grant Aegis, and the second blade will always grant Vigor. Psychic Force, reduced cooldown. Blade Renewal, reduced channel duration from 3 to 2. Jagged Mind, increased bleeding duration from 1 to 3 in competitives. Psychic Riposte, this trait now always grants 1 blade and the unblockable effect when dodging. Reduce the number of blades granted when evading or blocking an attack from 3 to 2. Necromancer. I want to say in advance, I am so sorry. Scourge has always been intended to be a viable support option, but the lack of quickness or alacrity has been completely fine. Has held it back in endgame content outside of specific cases. This won't be an issue anymore as we've adjusted Desert Empowerment to be the source of alacrity. With Scourge support likely becoming more viable in general use, we felt that its reviving power was a bit too high and have made some adjustments to bring it more in line. We'll be keeping a very close eye on Alack Scourge's performance and will follow up as needed. Well of Blood now gives regen. That's kind of cool. Up until now, the only way a Necro can give regen was Staff 2 Mark of Blood. And some bosses didn't trigger Mark, so you couldn't give your team regen with that. However, Well of Blood was usually saved as a revival tool, not something to spam for boons. So, kind of a pro and con here. Ritual of Life, reduced revive percentage from 7 to 2 in PvE. Alright, Ritual of Life is what made the Well skills, the Well of Blood and Lesser Well of Blood, revive per pulse. You ever see a Necro pull a whole bunch of people over that are down and then put down a well and they all start reviving at once? Ritual of Life was part of that. So there was 5 pulses, 7% per pulse. Quick math, that's 35%. They could have 2 wells down at once, so if they did their whole combo, they'd pull everyone together with transfusion, both wells, and that would, over the next couple of seconds, do 70% of the revive bar on everyone in the pile. And of course, they're manually reviving one of them at the same time. So this change takes it from 70% total revive power to 20 if you use both wells. That's 10 per well. Quickening Thirst has been reworked. Gain life force when you strike an enemy with a dagger skill. Dagger was already the king of generating life force. This was not needed at all. They did this because they took away the dagger cooldown reduction on Quickening Thirst, and they needed to put something there. This skill, let's see, Life Siphon, that's the Dagger 2. The skill is no longer channel. This is actually kind of cool, and it instead just does an instant single attack. Enemies struck by the attack will then get damaged over time. So imagine that you just like click a button, it instantly gets them with the thing, and then you see the drain happening, but you can do other things. So that was actually kind of nice, and you'll be healed for the damage dealt. Life from Death no longer revives allies and now increases outgoing healing. So Life from Death was the trait that revived nearby allies by a whopping 10% when you left Shroud. Usually, I think most Necros took the Vampiric Embrace, not this. Banshee's Wail no longer increases outgoing healing. So Banshee's Wail increased the healing of Warhorn by a whopping 50%. Which equated to like 1 to 200 healing per second. It was god-awful. The Warhorn does not heal a lot. I remember being so excited when this first came out, and I did the math and tested it, and I was like, wow, this is crap. And again, it's in the same column as Vampiric Embrace. Most people take Vampiric Embrace. Transfusion. This is the skill that when your Necro pulls your downstate allies to themselves, this is what they use to do that. This will now only pull downed allies when initially clicked. Reduced the revival pulse from 2% per pulse to 1. So from 20 total to, or no, was it 5 pulses? So I think it was 10 total to 5. When used with the Scourge Elite specialization in PvE. So Transfusion, the way it worked, is it attempted to pull nearby allies to you every second. So for example, I'm going to go in game here. I'm not on my Necro, but just as a quick visual aid, if I'm a Necro and there was like downstate ally, downstate ally, downstate ally, and downstate ally way over there, I activate Transfusion. These three would get pulled to me instantly, just boom, boom, boom. And then that one over there, I would need to move a bit closer, and maybe when I got this close, it would pull him. So the transfusion effect would stay on you for like 5 to 6 seconds and continually attempt to do a pull on downstate nearby people. Additionally, if someone was downstate and you activated it and they instantly got pulled, so like this heart and square marker, just boom, boom, and then you move a bit, like 6 seconds later, it would pull them again and reposition them again if they weren't up yet. It would a non-stop attempt to pull down state people, but the people that had already pulled would not be pulled again for like 5 or 6 seconds. But if they were pulled right at the start, they could be pulled again right at the end. So they've made it to where it will only pull the second you click the button. It was also a bit friendly before, so like if you were like, oh, I'm gonna pull that guy, and then you activate it and it doesn't pull, you're like, oh, I wasn't in range. You move into range, then the pull would happen because of it was like a buff, and it would keep trying. Now, if you're a hair out of range, too bad. You failed to save them, they're dead now. So it's no longer friendly with range. You can no longer use it while on approach. You can no longer save one person, then move a bit and save another person. It just does it one time, and then you follow it up with terrible, terrible reviving power because they nerfed this from 70% down to 20. So yeah, you can still use what was it, Runes of Mercy for the really fast revival on one person at a time, but this honestly makes me so sad. I don't play my Necro as much anymore, so this isn't like a direct attack on my gameplay style, but Support Scourge was something that I've actually gotten people to leave WoW to come to Guild Wars 2 for. Because it is such a cool thing unique to this game. I'm like, yeah, the Necromancer is good at resurrecting players from the dead. What a shock. No other MMO does that well. And it was so good, and they are like just kicking the crap out of it. I'm hoping that there's enough flack on the forum that they don't do this. Because, okay, you know what? I should pause there because there's more. All right, Unholy Feast now removes boons instead of turning them into conditions. Spiteful Trait now removes boons instead of converting them into conditions. Enfeebling Blood no longer converts boons into conditions. Lesser Enfeebled no longer converts boons into conditions. Devouring Darkness now has an increased cooldown. Signet of Suffering has been reworked and causes Signet skills to remove boons from foes, but doesn't convert them. Signet of Vampirism reduce cooldown. Plague Signet reduce cooldown. Reduce the number of conditions transferred. Signet of Spite reduced cooldown. But reduce the duration of Crippled, Blind, and Weakness to 4 seconds of PvP and World v World. Adjust the duration of Bleeding, Poison, Torment to 8 seconds. Signet of the Locust, reduce cooldown from 30 to 25. So many of the Necro's ways of converting boons into conditions, which was like one of their main things, is gone. I really hope this doesn't go through. These are like class-defining features that they're taking away to give them alacrity. And the thing is, Scourge was the worst healer in the game. It's got barriers, good reviving, and the worst healing. I think that's fair. They are taking away the reviving. It still has terrible healing and giving it alacrity. Who's going to want that in their party? I don't know. I don't know. So continuing on with more nerfs, Scourge. That was just the core. Scourge. Desert Empowerment. This is now a Grandmaster tier, which replaces Feed from Corruption. So Feed from Corruption's gone. Desert Empowerment was in tier 2. The barrier from this trait will now only apply around the shade and will affect 5 targets. It used to be 10 targets. This trait now also grants alacrity to allies when you grant them barrier. And because this is a Grandmaster trait, you cannot take the Sand Savant, the giant shade. So you have to take the teeny little baby shades and to give people alacrity if you want to do that. Sandstorm Shroud will now pulse barrier to allies near the Scourge before it detonates. Abrasive Grit will no longer cause Sand Flare to give a barrier to allies. In addition to its previous effects, this trait now also applies Might when you apply barrier. Whoop-de-doo. Sand Flare will now grant a reduced amount of barrier to nearby allies. Nerf. Sadistic Searing no longer reduces the cooldown of punishment skills. Increased burning from 2 to 4 seconds in competitive. Trail of Anguish, reduced cooldown. Ghastly Breach, reduced cooldown and reduced duration by 1 second in World v World. Desiccate, this skill now also grants Fury. Ooh, you got Fury now. Increased Might from 5 for 8 seconds to 8 for 9 seconds. Reduced cooldown slightly. Serpent Siphon has been reworked because honestly, I don't think I've ever seen anyone seriously using Serpent Siphon in any game mode in the entire time I played this game. It will now grant now send a Serpent to target area that will detonate upon arrival. Allies in the area get Barrier Regen and Aegis. Enemies will be poisoned, and one of their boons will be converted into Torment. Reduce cooldown. So here's the issue. The fact that it says sends a serpent to an area scares me. Aegis needs to happen the second you click it to be reliable in any content. It is already a high skill cap boon. Block 1 hit. It could be a 1 damage hit or a 1,000 damage hit. It blocks 1 hit. This Send a Serpent makes me think it's going to have a travel time. I hope it doesn't. It might just be a lightning fast animation. I don't know. Recently, Ranger got the White Tiger with End of Dragons, and the White Tiger has a roar that gives Aegis to their team. It used to be like a 2-second cast time. No one could get it to work at the right moment they needed it to for boss fights, so they changed it to like a 1/4 second cast time, and it's much more reliable now. If this thing has a travel time, they're going to have to fix it at some point, or it's just not going to be a reliable source of Aegis. Path of Corruption now increases the cooldown of Nefarious Favor by 50% World v World. So, a lot of the ways they generate Shroud as being reduced. Wait, where's the, hold on, where was the thing? Oh, it's not in here. I don't see the thing about the shade on this page. Okay, they had a slide during the 2-hour thing that we watched that said the duration of the shade was reduced from 20 seconds to 8. There was a lot of outburst in chat by that. So they drastically reduced the duration of the shade. They reduced a lot of the barrier generation and gave up barrier generation to a few weird skills, like the Serpent. They gave Alacrity, they gave Fury, and they nerfed the hell out of the ability to revive people on Support Scourge. So it is not looking good for Support Scourge. I think Support Scourge, they gave it Alacrity and then said, it's only fair since we gave you this, we take away this other stuff. And the Scourges are just like, we never wanted Alacrity. So I hope this doesn't go through. It looks bad. Harbinger. Vials. This trait no longer reduces the cooldown of Elixir skills. Increase Vuln stacks from 5 to 7. Reduce cooldown of all the Elixir stuff. Ranger. Spirits won't be granting Alacrity moving forward. Really quick, Magnifying Lens, thank you so much for the raid. We're going over the patch notes for our YouTube friends. Spirits won't be granting Alacrity moving forward. We've taken this opportunity to do a larger pass on the skill type. Spirits will now trigger a smaller effect when summoned, slam the ground for a more powerful effect, and finally grant boons for a shorter period of time. Druid was the natural place to slot in an Alacrity build, while we decided to give Untamed access to quickness. Nature, so again, Druid will be Alac if they want to, and Untamed can be quickness if they want to. Nature Magic is also getting a larger set of changes which to solidify it as a support trait line. Rounding out the Ranger changes are some improvements to Sword and introducing a condition damage build for Druid. Okay, so the one-handed sword. The 2 is getting replaced with Pounce. Delivers a leaping strike and gain vigor when striking an enemy. The skill deals increased damage to targets that are movement impaired or disabled. The natural thing to use this with would be, something like Offhand Dagger. The 5 skill disables them and cripples them. It cripples them and does bleeding. So you could use the 5, which slows them, and then use 2 to pounce in. Serpent Strike, which used to be part 2 of the 2 skill, is now the 3 skill. This skill's been moved to the 3rd slot and has been reworked. It now leaps to the target, so you have 2 forward leaps. This one has an evade, applies poison and cripple on hit, and it will immobilize if they were already movement impaired. Again, fantastic follow-up for like Dagger 5, for example. Spirits have been reworked. A spirit will now grant an initial effect when summoned, slam the ground for a secondary effect, and then grant boons to nearby allies for a period of time. They're doing to spirits similar what they did to banners. Instead of something that's out and pulsing all the time, it's like you slam it down, it appears, it does a lot of magic, and then it vanishes. So you don't have to maintain it. Pros and cons to that, we'll come back to that. Farsighted trait now increases the minimum damage bonus from 5 to 10%. Strider's strength is going to replace Strider's defense. That was the sword trait. Will now give you power and gain additional power when wielding a sword, gain might when evading an attack. I think it's kind of odd that they're giving it a bonus power when they gave it poison. So, I don't know. I guess the 1 will be power scaling and the 3 will be condition scaling. I'm not really sure yet because I don't have the numbers, but that's what they're doing. Rejuvenation now triggers when using a beast skill instead of when being struck. Instinctive Reaction no longer grants quickness and instead gives regen to nearby allies whenever you use a healing skill. Evasive Purity, this trait no longer has an internal cooldown. That is the trait where when you dodge, you remove conditions from you. Spirited Arrival, this trait now grants might instead of vigor when born notes. This trait will now also heal allies to whom you grant regeneration. Now, I have a big question on this that I'm not sure about. Windborn Notes is the trait that gives regen and some other boons to your Warhorn skills. I happen to be on my Druid right now. You see it gives regen to nearby allies and reduced cooldown duration and minor healing to any allies you do. So If Windborne Notes is gives healing to allies to whom you grant regeneration, like all forms of regeneration, that's going to be insane with Healing Spring, which goes regen, 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 regen. It pulses 6 times regen applications. And if it's just doing small heals, that's going to be fantastic. However, if it's intended to be written, will heal allies to whom you grant regeneration with Warhorn skills, then it would just be Warhorn 4 and 5. But if it's read as written, if it's just, raw, then Healing Spring will synergize with that incredibly well. Lingering Magic now increases the effectiveness of regen you apply in addition to its previous effect. That is awesome. So Lingering Magic is this trait right here. It's just a flat 240 concentration. Druid is one of the classes that did not have our regen is stronger trait. Tempest does. One of the Revenant builds had it. Mechanist had it. There's a few support classes that just had our regen is stronger. And it's kind of cool. Some had it, some didn't. And now Druid is getting it just passively. That's kind of neat. I assume it's going to be 20% because I think that's what the others have, but we will see. Protective Ward has been reworked and now casts Lesser Guard when you swap pets. Now, Guard is a skill it's decent, but it's rarely worth a utility slot. What it does is it's an instant button, and you hit it, and your pet soaks damage for your team for 6 seconds, and you get might for every hit that it took during that time. So now it's going to do some lesser form of that whenever you pet swap. Invigorating Bond now uses the Ranger's healing power, heals allies around the Ranger, and grants protection and vigor to nearby allies. So that's kind of cool. Nature's Vengeance. Spirits will slam the ground a second time before disappearing. So that one... So I want to go over this again. Spirits have been reworked. They will now grant an initial effect when summoned, slam the ground for a secondary effect. We don't know what it is yet. And then grant boons for a period of time. So they showed it, and it was like appear, slam, it would like shake, and then vanish. So with this trait, I don't know what the slam is going to do, but this trait is going to make it appear, slam, shake, then slam again, and then leave. So I can't fully appreciate what this does without more info on what the spirits do at this time. However, since the spirits the only spirit during the broadcast that they ever actually moused over was the Spirit of Nature, the one that currently it just sits there and constantly pulses minor healing on your whole group. It appears that from looking at the tooltip on the broadcast, I paused on the frame. It's going to, when you use it, it does the revive, and it will give regen, and it converts up to 5 conditions on each ally into boons. 5 targets, so 25 conditions total, and then goes on a 2-minute cooldown. So it's an AoE revive, and it converts conditions on a 2-minute cooldown. Which is double the cooldown of Glyph of the Stars. I don't know why I would ever use that. I'm hoping I'm misunderstanding something, but that's what we saw from when we read the tooltip during the broadcast. They never moused over the utility or water spirits during the broadcast, so I haven't been able to see those. Trapper's Expertise no longer reduces the cooldown of trap skills. Okay, so Trapper's Expertise was the skill that reduced the cooldown of traps by 20%, but it also increased their duration by 60%. So just to show you real quick, Healing Spring Healing, as a healer, 9,900. Take this trait, it becomes 16,000. That's over a long period of time. That's the full regeneration healing amount. However, you're not going to not take this just because they took the 20% off of it. If you're taking traps, you're taking this trait. And what really stings is they took the 20% away from this, gave the 20% for free to Healing Spring, and they reduced the cooldown of Spike Trap, and they didn't give it to Flame Trap, Viper's Nest, or Frost Trap in any game mode. So I've enjoyed using Flame Trap and Viper's Nest in many builds in PvP, but they're going to go to their untraded cooldowns, which is 15 and 20 seconds, because this will no longer give them minus 20%, and they're not baking it in. So not real happy about that. Spike Trap is getting, for free, it's going from 45-second cooldown to 25 in PvE, which is substantial in that one game mode. Resounding Timbre, this trait no longer reduces the cooldown of command skills. We heal as 1, baked in cooldown, Sigum, cooldown reduced, Protect Me, Search and Rescue, cooldown reduced, and they did not, for whatever reason, even though it's hardly used, they did not give the cooldown reduction to Guard. I don't know why. Seeing a lot of that lately. Also, in the last major patch, they did that to survival skills. They did baked in cooldown, baked in cooldown, baked in cooldown, didn't give it to sharpening stone. I don't know why. Druid, Grace of the Land now gives alacrity instead of might. And with the changes they're doing to the Frost Spirit, I don't know how much, if any, might it gives now. So it's cool that Grace of the Land gives alacrity now, but it is, not going to give might anymore. Grace of the Land is just when you use any skill in Astral Form, you pulse that boon. Rejuvenating Tides, this skill will now give might to nearby allies in addition to its previous effects. So Rejuvenating Tides is just Astral 4, it's this thing, the pulsing healing for 5 seconds. So now it'll give might and alacrity if you take that trait line. Natural Convergence is the 5. It will now give might to allies every pulse. That's the offensive one. Blood Moon replaces the trait Primal Echoes. Primal Echoes was the staff trait. It will now daze nearby foes whenever you become the Celestial Avatar. And before it was daze foes when you swap to the staff, and then staff reduction. Bleed foes you immobilize or disable. So this opens up the door to possibly some condition damage druid gameplay, but there's some caveats we'll get to soon. Natural Balance replaces Natural Stride. I'm very sad about this. Natural Stride was awesome. It's a flat 33% increase to movement speed unless you get hit with a Cripple, Chill, or Immobilize. And they're deleting it entirely. I'm very sad to see it go. I really liked that one. Now you do increased damage and take reduced damage for a period of time after entering Celestial Avatar. They showed the tooltip. I believe it was 10% increased damage and 10% reduced damage taken for 5 seconds after going into or leaving Avatar. I would rather have Stride. Change this back. Eclipse trait. This trait replaces Ancient Seeds. Now, I loved Ancient Seeds. It was my go-to for PvP. However, I recognize that similar to my frustrations trying to land CC on Mesmers, other people are frustrated by fighting against druids getting rooted all the time. However, again, I feel like it was a class-defining feature. So kind of weird to see it go. We're losing our fast mobility. We're losing the roots, our largest access to roots. And in trade, we are getting your Celestial Avatar abilities inflict conditions on enemies. So the 3 skill was an Immobilize, the 5 was burning every pulse, the 1 I think was poison, which are all kind of cool, but I don't know how powerful they're going to be. And that means that we're going to be wanting to go into Avatar state as often as possible for damage. Which means that if someone goes down state and you need to Glyph of the Stars to res them, your Avatar state might be on cooldown because you've been going into it constantly to do damage if you were a DPS druid. Additionally, now we have to burn Avatar state to keep Alacrity up, and we have to burn Avatar state to keep Might up. Even the support druids might not have Avatar state when they need to do clutch heals because they're having to use it on cooldown. This is the exact same problem, just a different flavor of it. So now instead of slamming our spirits every time we want to keep boons up, we have to slam the astral skills every time. And we might not have the big heals when you need them. If we don't have access to the astral form the moment that someone's in trouble, we can't do Glyph of the Stars to revive them, and we can't do the huge heals. Glyph of Alignment, increase the bleeding duration from 8 to 10 in PvE. I'm surprised they didn't do that in all game modes because it's bad in all...
birds. How are you?
Hi, Birdtree. Because it's bad in all game modes. I'm surprised they didn't buff that everywhere. You never see anyone use this in any game mode. Glyph of Equality now gives stability to the non-Celestial version, which... when they first announced that they were going to put stability on the Celestial version of this skill, I actually posted on the forums. I was one of the people in there. I was like, hey, that's awful. Because that means it requires full astral power, Celestial Avatar cooldown, and the Glyph of Equality cooldown. You have to use all those things to give 1 stack of stability. Meanwhile, Guardian can just cast Stand Your Ground and fart it out to, at the time, 10 people. Now it's 5. So this is good that they did this. I don't know if it's worth taking still, but it's good that they did this. Plus, we won't have to have spirits on the bar anymore to keep, what was their job up, but I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen there, because Spirit of Stone was permanent protection uptime on the party. I don't know if Druid can still do that or not. Depending on how they change Stone Spirit, it might not give permanent protection uptime anymore. So this is an option for stability on demand on occasion. Natural Mender increases Astral Force generation from 5 to 8. This is really important because it used to, since the spirits don't stay out anymore, and you don't have to babysit them, that's both good and bad. Because it used to be that your regen and your heals splashing your spirits counted as healing, which filled the Astral Power Bar faster. So they were like battery packs. They would help you get back into Astral form more quickly. So since they're taking the permanent spirits away, this actually compensates for the fact that we're losing the battery packs. So that's kind of a needed trade-off. Cosmic Ray increased radius from 1 to 22. I will say this will be helpful in PvP and World where you didn't have the spirits. Cosmic Ray increased the radius. That is I think that's the Astral 1. Yeah, and then of course Cosmic Ray I think will also inflict poison with the Eclipse trait. So it'll be easier to land this, because right now, like, let's pretend I'm trying to hit an enemy. This is how, this is the size of the attack, and they're going to be increasing the size of that. Lingering Light currently gives a small increase to healing output, but by taking this, you're not taking the trait that gives Might or Alacrity in the future. Lingering Light no longer grants increased outgoing healing after exiting a Celestial Avatar, instead reduces the recharge of Avatar every time another player is healed by Avatar skill. So you're going to have 3 Grandmaster choices. Either give my party Alacrity, or all my Avatar skills are now offensive skills and can now poison and burn and stuff like that. Or I can go back into Avatar really, really fast. So Lingering Light is you're going to be able to get back into Avatar much more quickly. But it's not Alacrity and not offensive. So depending on the numbers, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. So, like, I guess if you were a druid and you were in a party and someone else is providing Alacrity and you're the support, you could take this to just be in Celestial more often. All right, Soul Beast, Spiritual Reprieve, reduce the casting time from 1.5 to 1 second, reduce the cooldown by 5. Untamed, Rending Vines, cooldown reduction, Unleash Power, reduce the internal cooldown from 15 seconds to 9 in PvE. Savage Slash, Death Strike, Relentless Whirl, and Multi-Shot all got power coefficient buffs, so they all do a bit more damage. Restorative Strikes, this trait no longer passively converts strike damage to healing, and it instead converts strike damage to healing when you or your pet unleash. Increased protection duration from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Let Loose, this trait replaces Fervent Force. That Fervent Force is, of course, the thing that lets you just machine gun lots of different abilities. They said it was very hard to balance, so... Grants boons to nearby allies when you use an Unleashed Ambush skill, but recharge your ambush when you swap weapons. So you can ambush, weapon swap, ambush again, which they couldn't do before. So when this is grants boons, I'm pretty sure this is going to be quickness, and this is going to be what allows quickness untamed. So quickness untamed is just, weapon swap and ambush again as often as possible, and you'll keep quickness on your party. Don't know if it's going to require concentration gear or not. Revenant. Herald's quickness application is being moved to elevated compassion and tied to maintaining upkeep skills. In its place, Draconic Echo will now cause facet passive effects to grant additional bonuses to the Herald. Just the Herald. Vindicator is also getting some adjustments in World to bring it more in line with other support builds. Core changes. Banish Enchantment now has a 5-second cooldown in World only. Aggressive Agility no longer removes immobilization, instead it just gives you resistance. Demonic Defiance will now also remove a damaging condition when triggered. Forced Engagement reduced the number of targets from 5 to 1, but the range was dramatically increased. Battle Scars increases the base healing by a bit in PvP. Herald Elevated Compassion, this trait now grants boons to nearby allies while 6 or more points of upkeep are in use, in addition to its current effect. So I believe this is the new way of maintaining quickness. So you need to keep 6 pips of upkeep active, forcing you to, swap between legends a lot. Draconic Echo, this trait no longer grants boons when using a consume skill, and instead causes facet passives to grant an additional bonus to the Herald specifically. Vindicator, Saint's Shield, reduce base barrier and healing from 582 to 300 World, reduce the healing attribute multiplier in World. Tree Song, reduce the number of conditions removed from 5 to 3, and Urn of St. Victor, reduce base healing in World. So, support Vindicator nerfed in World quite a bit. Okay, I gotta say, the most recent Revenant skill I've personally played was the Quickness Support Herald, And it was kind of fun. I didn't hate it. I gotta say, the idea of this change right here, in my own personal taste, I'm not really a fan of it. I preferred the old thing rather than getting forced to swap through legends a lot because I have to keep 6 pips active all the time. But that's how it's going to be going forward, unless they change their mind. Thief changes. In addition to moving Alacrity off of Wells, we wanted to improve Spectre's ability to play as a support role in larger group situations, which I think is nice. Ally-targeted Scepter skills will now grant their effects in an area around the target, and Shadow Step has been reworked to allow Shadow Shroud skills to affect multiple allies around the tethered target. We've also introduced a quickness build for Deadeye. Fire for effect will cause every stolen skill to become Steal Time, which now grants quickness in an area around you. We've also bumped up Daredevil's staff damage while reducing the damage of the more powerful stolen skills to make the build more consistent. So, core skill, improvisation. This trait now reduces the cooldown of all utility skills by a certain percentage when you steal instead of recharging a random skill. Endless Stamina has been reworked and renamed Fluid Strikes. Now, Fluid Strikes was a trait way in the past. They brought back the name. It is different now. It now grants the Thief a damage bonus for a period of time after using a movement skill or completing a Shadow Step. Pain Response has been reworked. It now removes the damaging condition from the Thief when completing a dodge roll. Guarded Initiation, this trait has been reworked and now grants the Thief resistance when using a movement skill with a 5-second internal cooldown. Swindler's Equilibrium, this trait now recharges steel by 1 second per trigger with a 1-second cooldown. Assassin's Reward, increase the base healing per initiative spent from, let's just say 50% by 50%. Upper Hand, reduced internal cooldown from 5 seconds to 4 in PvP and World v World. Okay, now, let's see. Okay, I was about to cover that, but it's down there. Daredevil, Bound, increase the power coefficient by a lot in in PvE. Staff Strike, increase power coefficient. Staff Bash, increase power. Brawler's Tenacity, no longer reduces cooldown of physical skills. Channeled Vigor, reduce cooldown competitive. Bandit's Defense, reduce cooldowns. Fist Flurry, reduce cooldown. Impairing Strikes, reduce cooldown of Impact Strike. Detonate Plasma will now deal damage to nearby enemies and no longer grant quickness. Sad times for Detonate Plasma. I think that's because it's getting moved to Steal Time. Throw Magnetic Bomb, reduce the power coefficient by quite a bit. Throw Unstable Reagent, increase the power coefficient by a bit. Throw Cursed Artifact, reduce power coefficient by a bit. Reduce Bleeding, Torment, and Confusion stacks from 5 to 3. Time in a Bottle, reduce duration from 5 to 3 seconds. Deadeye, stolen skills now grant their beneficial effects in a radius around the caster. Reduce casting time by approximately 25%. Steal Time, increase quickness duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds at PvE only. And remember, they're supposed to, steal and then you steal time. Steal and then you steal time. That's how they keep quickness on their party now, if they want to. Steal Resistance, increase resistance duration from 3 seconds to 5 in PvE. Malicious Intent, increase malice gain from 1 to 2. Fire for Effect, this trait no longer requires the target to grant boons to allies. Additionally, equipping this trait guarantees that the stolen skill will be Steal Time regardless of target's profession. This is what you take if you want to do quickness. Shadow Flare, reduce cooldown from 30 seconds to 20 in PvE only. The skill now only damages once instead of when used instead of pulsing. Shadow Swap now causes an additional strike to occur at your original location. 1 in the chamber, this trait now increases the damage of stolen skills in addition to previous effects. Binding Shadow, reduce cooldown from 30 to 20 in PvE and 30 to 25. Now immobilizes marked targets instead of knocking them down. Spectre. Ally-targeted Scepter skills now also grant a lesser effect to additional allies in a radius around the target. So when you're spamming Scepter skills on one target, it'll do a little bit of barrier and stuff to the people around that target. So, good change in my opinion. Second Opinion, this trait now grants conditioned damage instead of healing power when equipped and while wielding a scepter. Shallow Grave has been reworked, now causes Siphon to transfer conditions to targeted enemy or remove conditions from the Spectre and the targeted ally. Traversing Dust, this trait no longer grants alacrity to allies when using a Well skill. Shadow Step has been reworked. It now spreads the beneficial effects of your Shadow Shroud skills to allies around your tethered target and additionally grants boons to yourself and those allies when you use a Shadow Shroud skill. So I believe it says grants boons. They're being vague here. I think that is going to be part of how they grant the alacrity now. But a lot of these are really vague. Warrior changes. Shout out to Erolozen. I'm pretty sure these are the last few bullets in that custom build of his. With quickness being removed from banners, we want to introduce both a quickness and an alacrity build for Warrior Elite specs, and have done so for Berserker. It's quickness, Berserker, and Alac Bladesworn. respectively. We'll be keeping an eye on how these builds perform relative to their counterparts, and we'll make follow-up adjustments as needed. We've also tuned up Rifle and Offhand Dagger to make them more effective options. Core, Crack Shot, no longer reduce cooldown of Rifle, Longbow, and Harpoon skills. And then we've got, baked-in cooldown reduction of a lot of those skills. Also notable, Flurry. You can now move while channeling the skill, reduce the overall number of hits and animation time. Increase the bleeding duration per hit from 4 to 5 seconds. 4 to 6 seconds. Increase power coefficiency per hit from 0.2 to 0.3. Fierce Shot, increase power coefficient from 0.4 to 0.46 in PvP and World. Volley, reduce the cooldown from 5 seconds to 1. Reduce ammunition recharge from 12 to 10. So if you've got multiple ammunition of this, you could fire them back to back very, very quickly. Explosive Shell, reduce the cooldown, same thing. If you've got multiple ammo, you can use them very fast, 1 second in between. Reduce the ammunition recharge from 15 to 8. Increase power coefficient from 0.5 to 1.09 in competitive. Reduce the cripple duration. Brutal Shot, same thing, 1 second between firing ammo shots. The skill will now cause you to evade backward immediately and then fire at the end of the shot, whereas before it was the other way around, I believe. Lots of cooldown reduction. Soldier's Comfort now grants protection. Martial Cadence now gives stability instead of quickness in PvE. Peak Performance no longer reduces the cooldown of physical skills. Lots of cooldown reductions baked in. Signet Mastery no longer reduces the cooldown of Signet skills. Lots of baked in cooldown reductions. Vigorous Shouts no longer reduce the cooldown of Shout skills. Lots of baked in cooldown reduction of Shout skills. And Double Standards now grants resolution instead of quickness. Berserker. Flaming Fury. Reduce the number of hits from 8 to 6. Reduce cast time. Increase the power coefficient by quite a bit. Increase burning duration from 2 to 5. Arc Divider. Reduce the number of strikes from 3 to 1. Reduce the casting time from 1.8 seconds to 0.8 seconds. Reduce total power coefficient from 5.1 to 2.5 in PvE and slightly in PvP. Arc Divider is getting a massive nerf, it looks like. 3 hits to 1, and the 1 hit is weaker. Sorry. I don't know what to say about that. Blood Reaction, increase the base precision to ferocity conversion by 10%. This trait now converts 10% of power to condition damage. These bonuses are still doubled in Berserk mode. Bloody Roar, reduce the increased damage provided from 25 to 20% in PvE. Heat the Soul has been reworked. This trait will now grant boons to nearby allies. That's quickness. It's going to give quickness when you strike an enemy with a burst skill. So whenever you use a burst or a primal burst, you will give quickness to your allies. Spellbreaker, Winds of Disenchantment lowered the duration by 1 second World v World. Break enchantments, increase the number of boons removed from 2 to 4 in PvE. Reduce the number of boons removed in World v World. Wastrel's Ruin, the skill now removes boons when hitting an enemy. Blade Storm, the skill now grants a barrier when striking an enemy. I'm very curious to know how much, but they did not say. Blade Sworn, last one. Oh my god. Daring Dragon. This trait has been reworked. Dragon Slash. So if you take this trait, it will change Dragon Slash. Dragon Slash has a lower maximum charge level and consumes more flow per charge, but its damage per charge is increased and grants alacrity to nearby allies when you Dragon Slash. So if you wish to be an alacrity-providing Blade Sworn, assuming you have enough concentration for it, I don't know how much they'll need, you'll just need to Dragon Slash a lot. Pretty simple. You gotta just do what you're already doing. Honestly, I think they got one of the better deals, compared to Druid now having to burn their astral form constantly to keep up the boons. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff here that impacts classes I don't play a lot, like Virtuoso. I can't say much about that. I reported the changes, but I can't really give you like the nitty-gritty on what that's going to do to them because I just don't play it much. Some of these other changes, like murdering of Support Scourge, the changes to Druid, I'm very flabbergasted by a lot of this stuff. I'm flabbergasted. Like for example, they're just straight up deleting the Natural Stride skill, which gives 33% movement increase. There's a thing like that Mechanist has, and there's a thing like that Base Engineer has in one of their trait lines. I think it's Mecha Legs. Those are still there, but this one's just getting entirely deleted and getting replaced with an absolute crap trait. if you take the trait, Grace of the Land, which is going to give Alacrity, one, we're not going to give him more might, and then also Frost Spirit's getting a rework. I don't know if it's going to give might. I have no idea if Druid is going to be able to maintain 5 stacks of might in the future. Like, I know they'll still have Warhorn 5, that's all I know of. You're going to have to constantly burn Avatar just to keep boons up, which is the exact same problem in a different flavor. Mech is going to have to be constantly humping their mech's leg in order to keep it from not, like, just burning its cooldowns forever. Man, I don't know. There's been, just for the classes I'm well versed in, I'm not looking forward to this. It's kind of a bummer. I can't remember the last time they did a patch where just like the entire thing, I was just like, wow, I am not looking forward to this. I got to get some playtime in before this drops because that's when some of the fun stops. So, I mean, in the case of me, when this patch comes out, I'm absolutely going to be trying out the new Druid stuff, trying out the new combos. I love theory crafting, but a lot of this stuff I really loved in my kits is gone. So, kind of sad about that. As always, the links to all of this stuff is down below. I'll also include a link to the forum post where you can reply below it, screaming into the void. If there's something that you're like, please don't do this, it's going to have this impact, or please do this if you're going to be working on this anyway. Make sure you leave an update. It's the only way to make your voice heard, if it is possible to get your voice heard at all. That is the way to do it. And if you got any other questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, leave those in the comments down below, and I'll see y'all next time.